morning and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Sunday Live right here on SABC 1. My name is Tumelo Mototwane. Well, South Africa, of course, commemorates National Book Week every first week of September. The theme for this year has been Going Places. Well, it focuses on the power of books and how they can figuratively and literally take South Africans to a better place. Well, Puo is a South African word meaning language, a project aimed at empowering children through Africa's oral heritage and culture. And tonight, we put into context the commemoration, of course, and the issue of African languages among South Africa's youth as well as her children. Before we do that, let's take a look at this footage.
We create fun learning content for children that reflects Africa's languages and history and culture.
It all started when I had my first child. For my husband and I, it was a no-brainer that we would speak to her in our African languages as a way of connecting her to her African heritage. I knew that to do this, I would need support in the form of storybooks, DVDs, and games. The challenge was finding such materials in African languages that resonated with our contemporary lifestyles and the digital age in which our children are growing up. Research and consultation with other parents who were committed to giving their children the numerous benefits of multilingualism revealed the bigger educational challenge. Literacy tests showed that South African grade 3s can't read at the level that they should be. Experts believe that this is due to a lack of relevant materials from a language and context point of view. Only 17% of children's published books in South Africa are in African languages. Frustrated with the limited choice of African language materials available, Puo was born. Puo creates African heritage content for children that educates, entertains, and empowers them. We focus on children 9 years and younger. Puo's flagship brand is our Lula and Lebo bilingual range, which includes storybooks, first words flashcards, learn to count puzzles, My Body posters, and I Love Africa t-shirts, all available in African languages coupled with an English translation. Targeted at 4 to 6 year olds, children engage, learn, and play through everyday stories featuring Lula, her brother Lebo, and his pet chameleon Lem. Lula and Lebo have also gone digital and are part of the Apple iPad Schools project that promotes the use of iPads with local content in South African schools. Our materials empower the modern African child. They're accessible, user-friendly, and boost the self-confidence of the child by starring positive role models who look like them.
Our poll question for tonight is, are indigenous languages becoming extinct? Well, you can SMS us on 34065 and let us know how you feel about indigenous languages within South Africa. And joining us, of course, to discuss the seemingly declining rate of literacy, specifically that of indigenous languages in this country, we have the founder of Puo Educational Projects, Mrs. Ntabi Sibanda. We also have a mother of 3, Ms. Kinosi Kwene, who, of course, is navigating through the challenges of language instruction in a multilingual home, of course, not to mention the English school system. Ladies, welcome to Sunday Live. Thanks for coming. Ntabi, I'll start off with you. Our poll question for tonight is, are indigenous languages becoming extinct? Do you think this is the case?
Well, I think to say extinct is a bit extreme. I think languages go through a natural sort of process of popularity, of decline, of changing. Even if we look at English itself, which is a very commonly spoken language globally, sort of takes different forms in different parts of the world. So I think that's really the process that our local indigenous languages are going through to a certain extent. Having said that, though, I do think that, like with any other language, if it's not spoken, if it's not lived, if it's not practiced, then yes, it does start to slowly decline. And especially when we look at For Puo, in particular, we focus on young children. So when we look at urbanization and how differently our children are growing up to how we grew up, we're finding that the language issue is taking on a very different format to what we experience.
But when we look at the statistics, we have 83% of books that are being published in English. We have an 18% of books that are published in Afrikaans, and almost approximately 9% of books that only are published in indigenous languages. As far as development and reading materials are concerned, isn't this a problem?
So it is a problem, and it's a bit of a catch-22, because when you look at it from a market point of view, an economics point of view, you know, publishers will say, okay, well, no one's going to buy them, and the consumers say, well, I'm looking for them and I can't find them. So there's almost like that mismatch of finding each other in the market. So, for example, we have initiatives, as you mentioned, it being National Book Week, where the Book Development Council is looking specifically at developing more materials in indigenous languages to make that more accessible. And also for ourselves as Puo, as a young company in publishing, we also face that problem where it was, okay, is there a market? And I kind of took the view that, you know what, I know that I am looking for materials. I know other parents are looking for materials. And we really went out and looked to prove that there is a market. And we have, in terms of the demand that we've received.
And let's talk about that market. We have a mother of three. Kinosi, thanks for joining us. How do you sort of incorporate language within your household, especially when it comes to your children?
Sorry, to me, it's mother of two.
Two children?
Yes, of course. I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. My daughter grew up back at home in the Northwest, in Taung. For the first 3 years of her life, she was in an environment where she spoke Setswana. In fact, the first year she was with me in the Western Cape, where they speak Xhosa, obviously, and the dad speaks Xhosa. And what happened was that every time I speak, since I'm not 100% Xhosa speaker, the dad is not 100% Setswana speaker, we often found ourselves in a situation where we had to meet each other halfway and speak and mix the language with English. And the first few months, I remember at 9 months, when my daughter was starting to pick up a few words, she started calling her dad Tata, which is dad in Xhosa. Where I come from, kids learn the first words. The first word is normally mama or ma. So she was picking up the language from the dad. And then later on, I had to go and leave her with my mom in Taung, where there's an abundant Setswana being spoken there. There's kids playing in the streets everywhere. You can leave your child to roam and go wherever and speak the language and absorb as much of it as possible. That's the only language that's spoken there. Then at some point, at the age of 3, I had to bring her to come and live with me, obviously, and take over the parenting.
But while you were raising her, or raising your children in general, did you ever feel a need that you had to take them to schools that were dominantly English and more so not so much indigenous languages?
For me, it was never about language. First, it was, can I find a good school for my child that will bring out the best in them? They bring out their qualities. And unfortunately, if you're in the suburbs somewhere, the nearest school will always be the school where the main language that's used is English. It was never about she needs to be in a school that speaks only English. But that's what happened in the process. I just looked for a good school.
And what language do the kids speak now, both at school and at home?
Okay, my youngest one was born here. The first language that he absorbed was English because of the environment, the kids that he played with. The fact that I speak Setswana, Dad speaks Xhosa. There's not a single language that's spoken in the 100% in the household. And my daughter, even though she can speak Setswana, tended to, because obviously she spends most of her time also in here with me. When she comes back from school, the first language that she communicates with is English. Even when you speak in Setswana to her, she would respond in English. With my son, Dad speaks Xhosa, Tswana. I tried to speak Setswana to see if he'll be able to
grasp the language.
The language. I even delayed sending him to creche. It didn't help. He's 4. He went to creche this year, but he does respond to Setswana if you speak to him in Setswana.
Very interesting. We'll continue our conversation after the break to find out exactly, is the indigenous language in South Africa becoming extinct or not? But I just want to remind you that if you want to be a part of this conversation, do not hesitate to give us a call in studio. The number is 011-714-8080, and we'll see you shortly after this break. Welcome back to Sunday Live. We are discussing indigenous languages, and we're just commemorating National Book Week and also putting it to front that tomorrow is Literacy Day in South Africa. So if you want to be part of the conversation, don't hesitate to go to our social media, which is, of course, Facebook. We're at Sunday Live on SABC1. On Twitter, we're at Sunday Live SABC1. And do hashtag Sunday Live SA, or alternatively, you could just call us in studio on 011-714-8080. I understand, Vuseko from Durban, you're on the line. Welcome to Sunday Live.
Hey, hello, sir.
Hello, welcome.
Yes, speaking to Mvo, yes, I'm at Durban, but my home, I'm all the way from Bizana, Eastern Cape. Okay, ungabulengxaki lekhala xa ndijonga ulwimi lesixhosa yabona because if you go around Bizana and those it is like let's say stuff, you know, I mean you'll never find the Xhosa newspapers, you know. I mean it's very rare to get this newspaper of this language, you know. I don't know if maybe there are no people to write these newspapers, or maybe they just look down on their own language. I'm not sure what's the reason, but I'm just worried of this language, really.
Thank you so much, Vuseko. A very interesting point that you're making there on the media and how different media platforms, of course, don't publish in their language, at least not most of them. Thank you so much. We have Mutlalipula. Welcome to Sunday Live.
Motlalipulele kae mama?
Rona rale nahle wa gesho.
Worry thing. Ke mametse conversation alona, it's so interesting.
Mama.
Coming to our language, I've got my daughter who was staying with my parents in Batswana. Udutele mama till are 7 years abua Setswana. Ha are 8 years ka monka todula lena mo Johannesburg. And she was go private school babua English. But I made sure for go high we keep on speaking Tswana. And since then, we have never changed. Till today, once I wear Tswana, we wear English, we wear Afrikaans, we wear Sotho. But I believe for go high, we have to keep on practicing the language.
Thank you so much. That's an important point. So much. And Ntabi, let's come back to you, because I suppose she raised a very important question. It needs to come back to the family, to the home.
Definitely.
How important is it for our parents and our relatives to also incorporate indigenous languages into our children?
Definitely. I mean, that's the core in terms of how the home plays that role in terms of the importance of language, but also just the importance of your identity and who you are in general. So it's a bigger sort of more encompassing thing. Yeah. But really, it's about making sure you, as the parents, that know that the extended family knows that that's your choice, that you want them to be exposed to the language. And I think the big misconception is that children will get confused, and that is a huge misconception. Yeah. As long as you keep to that one language, we were talking about this earlier, that not to confuse. So if, you know, so if I speak in Sesotho to my children, they'll associate Sesotho with me. They'll associate Sindebele with their father. So they'll never speak to me Gasindebele, to the point that my daughter won't even let me try and help her with her basic isiZulu homework. She's just like, no, mama, wena, ubua Sesotho, don't even try it, you know, kind of thing.
But,
so,
you know, let me just jump in with you, and very briefly, because we need to go to an ad break. Do you think, Jorge, we still live in a time where parents feel that when a child speaks English, it validates that they're educated or they're intelligent?
Definitely, to me. Even in instances where, you know, I've gone home with my kids to my mother, and everybody speaks Setswana, but I'm always, every time they try to communicate with my kids, especially the little one, they speak English. And I would say to them, please, can you just stick to speaking Setswana? And there's always an emphasis of how nicely they speak. But the point is, you're not bringing your kids here because you want them to sound like English speakers, first language English speakers, or I know that's a bonus if your child can be able to speak a language that is so globally recognized. Yeah. But at the same time, some of us are so-called economic refugees in the cities. We're here because we want to make a better life for ourselves, better futures for our children, whereas back where we come from, there's not that much scope for you to... But along the way, it's a situation of you win some, you lose some.
All right, let's go to an ad break, and when we come back, we continue our discussion, and we ask Nthabi about the Buo projects and how exactly they aim to impact lives. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Sunday Live right here on SABC 1, where we're continuing off with our conversation in our very last segment. And we have your poll results ready. I asked you a question earlier on, are indigenous languages becoming extinct? Well, as you can see with the results on your screen right now, 70% of our voters voted yes, they are, and only 30% said no. And Nthabi, with those results, how are you, of course, contributing to ensuring that there's a solution to this problem?
So what we're discussing during the break is really that we are publishing the books, so they are available. For example, we're talking about the Gcina Mhlophe book that we've done in 9 indigenous languages as well as English. And they're available on our website. They're also getting around to schools and to retail stores as well. And also through corporate social investment partnerships, we then distribute them into rural areas or peri-urban areas so that there is that accessibility and they cover that cost element. And also for parents who want to then, pledge, they can buy one for their kids to have at home, but also pledge one for a child who may not be able to afford that, and that's available on our website.
And I suppose, Guinness, that's where you also come in as the parent, because I know that in as much as kids don't find vegetables quite tasty, and the parent has to always make it fun, make it interesting to eat your vegetables, this is another fun way to also learn with your child, right?
Tumela, I was actually telling Nthabi saying that I'm really excited. I want to be part of that project if possible. I've been looking for books for my daughter, especially because she still has retained a lot of that Setswana that she learned or she started speaking. She even SMSs her aunties in Setswana. It's not perfect, but you can see the language is still there. So I was wondering, I was always wondering, how can I help this child to go further and be able to read and understand Setswana? And now that she has these books, I think, there's a way forward for me to help my children. And yeah,
this is how you plan to do it. And Tabsing, you also incorporate the parent, right? And I suppose it's not only for corporate investment to come in, but also the teachers, the communities, the friends, the parents. It's the whole society cycle, isn't it?
Definitely. And that's exactly what we're doing. And it's quite nice because we're seeing a change also in schools in suburbs who also want to bring in indigenous language as a second or additional language, or sometimes third additional language. So even in the urban areas, we're seeing that conversation starting to change. And as I said, with parents also requesting that. And sometimes it's not even parents requesting it because that's their home language, but they see that, okay, I want my child to be able to benefit from this multilingual and multicultural society that we live in. So it's quite a nice diversity that we're seeing in terms of our client base.
And where can they get a hold of the books for those who want them?
So on our website, which is www.buo.co.za. So that's puo.co.za.
Just any last words that you would like to share, Oskinos, to all the parents out there with their children probably facing similar problems, or even parents who voted feeling that the indigenous language is actually becoming extinct?
My personal feeling is that I actually don't believe that, well, in terms of the language I speak, I think it's different in the cities, it's different in the rural areas. When you go to the rural areas, the primary language that's being used is that, yes, but it's also important to extend that to kids who are not within reach of communities that are predominantly speaking that languages, to be able to help the language and to help the kids to keep speaking their languages.
Thank you so much, Kino Sekwene and SABC Banda. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, before I leave you, I just want to remind you that the 8th clause of the Freedom Charter, it states that the doors of learning and culture shall be opened. All the cultural treasures of mankind shall be open to all by free exchange of books, ideas and contact with each other and our lands. Indeed, those are the words to ponder on as we all should look at how far we really have come towards achieving this freedom ideal. Thank you for joining me this evening. My name is Tumelo Mututwane. I'll see you next Sunday. Goodbye.